Dr. Robyn Faith Walsh was doing a live stream with Gnostic Informant. Be sure to subscribe to Neal. And I had to ask a little super chat, maybe two. But let me know what you think of the show. And Robyn's got some courses, lectures coming up on MythVision you're not going to want to miss. MVPcourses.com, down in the description.
And Derek from MythVision Podcast is in the house with the question. This may be clipped for his channel, so no, I'm just kidding. But it might be. Dr. Walsh, do you think there was a communities behind the Gospels, including non-canon, even if the German Romanticism method is not correct?
So I think that there's somebody in some kind of group, right, behind these texts, meaning it doesn't make a lot of sense for any of these authors, canonical or non-canonical, to be motivated to write a story about Jesus, about Christ, about his teachings, if they're not aware of what we would call Christianity or some kind of community. Now, I don't want to get too in the weeds. There are a couple of things to unpack about this. When it comes to community, the problem with the word community is we in English put all kinds of weight on that word. When we say community, we think of a group that's like self-evidently bounded, that like recognizes it's in a community, that it's already well established institutionally. We have all kinds of understandings of how that word functions that I think don't necessarily map on sociologically to what the formation of early Christianity in its earliest stages probably look like. You probably had people coming in and out of the movement to some extent. The word ecclesia, where we get church, actually meant assembly in Antiquity. And John Kloppenborg has written a great book called Christ Assemblies about this, where people, might have multiple affiliations. They might go to what we would call a church, but they probably, like, if you wanted a hamburger, you had to sacrifice meat, like Paul talks about this problem, right? Like sacrificing to idols. Like some people couldn't give up In-N-Out. So they still were going to the sacrifice of animals to get their their keto diet. And so then they would go back to the assembly. We might look at that and say well, this person is in a church, but they're also, worshiping ISIS. What, right? I'm being kind of fast and loose here, but you understand what
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea of the cohesive community, and this is the only thing that these people care about, that these are, this is the only group that the gospel, say, author or any author is writing for, and that it has a singular center, purpose, focus. That's the thing that I want to trouble a little bit. So I often talk in terms of spheres. Whoever's writing these gospels, or canonical or non-canonical, is probably part of multiple different kinds of what we might consider communities or groups or assemblies. A Christ assembly. Maybe they're still going to another kind of, if they're a Gentile, another kind of worship group. Maybe they have, in their domestic space, still have an icon to the lares, or they, in the ancient alarm system used to be Jupiter of the hearth, right? So maybe they're still making sure that they have an altar in their home to whatever patron deity that they want to have associated with domestic space. And then certainly whoever's writing these texts, even patronizing a person to write these texts, is probably associated with other writers, right? They're reading things, consuming other kinds of literature that informs what they put into their own gospels. And most writers want to see their work spread broadly, not written by and for communities of a very singular nature. So I think that, there probably were Christians, or what we might call Christ groups, behind the Gospels to some extent. But that German that romantic idea of, they're all just these Christians huddled, hiding, from persecution, choosing their one literate spokesperson to write the gospel down for them because they're, holding on to an oral tradition that goes back multiple generations. That to me is the romantic reconstruction of these communities that I don't think bears up to, sociological scrutiny.
Wow, that makes that's a great question, and then that made a lot of sense. Thank you for that, Derek. And go and subscribe to MythVision Podcast. And by the way, there's a course coming up. I might as well throw that out there. You guys just filmed a course about this subject, so you got to look out for that. I'm definitely gonna be getting mine. So keep on the lookout for that. Thank you. MythVision Podcast is back with another one. I can't wait for your lectures. Do you think the First Corinthians Creed is a legendary in nature? We can point to the Gospels as legend, but Paul and that creed?
We talked about this when I saw Derek last, and I think I wasn't sure then. I'm not sure. I'm sure. Now, I have a tendency to see these things as a little bit more nebulous than like the idea of an actual creed being what Paul had in mind. And I'm not quite sure. Tell Derek to write another note. Like, can we point to the Gospels as legend? If we're trying to get down to like, I mean, we know Paul's writing to some group of some kind, right? Like the idea that they might have some kind of creed, okay, like that's totally fine. It doesn't actually challenge much except to say that Paul's invoking, some kind of language to try to give a sense of community possibly to this group that, especially with the Corinthians, is otherwise not. But I would have to think a little bit. I have to keep thinking about this, and he can ask me the next time. I'll do some more homework on trying to decide whether
it is a very interesting question, and I don't know if anyone can say for sure, but yeah, it's something to look at. I'd be interested to hear how you, as an expert, look at that. So thanks for that question, Derek.